So Viltrox was nice enough to team up with the Z8 Photo YouTube channel, and they sent me the absolute tiniest lens ever. This is the Viltrox 28mm f4.5 chip pancake lens in Z mount. The lens is only $100, but what can it do? We're gonna find out. First, Viltrox didn't send me any talking points. They simply said, we'd like you to test it out and create some content sharing your thoughts. Well, I really want to test and shoot, so I just made some notes that we're gonna run through real quick while I do the unboxing. First off, I noted this is the smallest lens I have ever seen and thus ever used. It has a nifty switch on the front that covers the front element, and so you don't get a front lens cap. It's a fixed f4.5 aperture. It doesn't change. It just is. Oddly enough, it also doesn't manually focus, but it does autofocus, shockingly. Looking at this tiny lens, I have no idea how they fit any mechanisms into this lens to make it autofocus. However, somehow they got focus motors and a USB-C port for any firmware updates in the future. That can be found right here on the back. Be really careful because it's so small you may accidentally get your greasy fingers on the front element, or even more likely, the rear element. Do not set this lens down without a lens cap on it. Spec-wise, 6 elements in 6 groups, 2 of which are ED, 2 of which are spherical. It does have Viltrox HD Nano multi-layer coating, and the front element supposedly has a unique design for producing very tight starbursts. It has a minimum focus distance of about 12.6 inches, and dimensionally it's 60.3 by 15.3 millimeter, or 2.37 by 0.602. That's not even 5/8 of an inch long for us Americans out here, and it weighs around 60 grams or 2.1 ounces. That's literally like the weight of like a single serving bag of Cheez-Its. Since there's no switches, no rings, or anything, we're just gonna jump straight into the tests and then move on to the image review. First, we have to look at our focus speed. It's not too bad for what it is. We do have a little bit of focus breathing. Now we have to check our saturation. The day is early and it's a little bit wet outside, so we may have to improvise. We'll take one shot of our typical red saturation object, but we'll do a little bit over here too, just in case. We'll use the sky for our blues, the toy slide for our yellows, and we'll fire one across the yard for the green. Black and white ability is almost compromised today since everything is soaking wet, including my regular subject of the post. We'll take a picture of this wet tree here and we'll see what we can do with that. You see, we do have quite a bit of vignetting on this lens, kind of to be expected. Who cares? I add some anyway. It's easy to get rid of if you want. All right, so we are in Lightroom right off the bat. Red saturation looks pretty good. It does have a bit of that kind of orange look to it. We had some other reds that we took just in case. Yeah, just a slight kind of orange kind of feel to the reds, but pretty good. I like that all right. Let's check out the yellow. The yellow is pretty saturated. Let's check out the blues. The blues are not overly saturated, but this is the saturation I prefer, right? It's more of a neutral blue. Sometimes lenses, especially Nikon lenses, like to kind of look more like this. And that's a little what I call JPEG blue. And I don't prefer that. I usually end up pulling them back. I don't feel the need to pull these back. I would say it's pretty neutral. It's not super well saturated, but I do personally prefer that. And we've got a speck of dust on that front element, and already we can see it right there. It's so tiny, it was just inevitable. I'd say the greens are pretty saturated, pretty well saturated. Wow, I mean, insane vignetting on this. We kind of expect that. It's a pancake, it's inexpensive, not a lot of room to correct for that. So I did this for a black and white ability. This is not a great subject for it. We may have to experiment with our actual images. Actually, it's not bad. It's just a tad flat, but there are certainly wildly more expensive Nikon-made lenses that are flatter than this. And this lens is incredibly inexpensive. It's really not terrible. I'd give it a 1, but it's not like a low 1. I just don't do decimal points in my grading system. What if we could pop in here and check out the sharpness, see what we're working with. It's pretty sharp. I wouldn't give it a 3. I'd give this a 2. Let's get in at an unreasonable 200%. Really ain't bad. It really ain't bad, especially for like a wide angle lens. The wider you get, and the more you zoom in, the more you start to notice that wide angle lenses tend to not be particularly sharp. They look better if you just leave them at their focal length without zooming in on them, right? You see this in like 20 millimeters, even the Nikkor Z 20 millimeter f1.8s, a $1,000 lens, wider than this, granted. Just kind of rambling a little bit. You get in at 200% on that one, and you can see that it's just, it's wide and it doesn't look that sharp, right? When you get in real close. At normal viewing levels, or even zoomed in at 100 instead of 200, it looks really, really dang sharp. And this one, even zooming in at 200, still holds its sharpness. So honestly, not a bad optical performance. I'm pretty surprised for $100. I might actually think this is optically maybe a little better than the Nikkor Z 28mm f2.8, but I would, any day of the week, I would take f2.8 over f4.5 personally. But this is also like $100, and this is super, super, super duper tiny. Now, if you wanted something to compare this to, you could pay 5 times as much and get the 26 f2.8, which its optics just stand on its own. It is just incredible optically, right? But 5 times the price. This lens, you're getting a ton for your money optically. All right, now I want to jump into just some quick images I fired off in the backyard. Got a little... This lens is pretty good. Not gonna lie, it looks great. It renders great. The contrast is not super duper contrasty, but I'd probably call this like a 2 or a really high 1 point something that I would round down to a 1 because I just don't do decimal points. Go back over here and look at the contrast. Yeah, it's not super, super, super duper contrasty. It's contrasty enough, I suppose. Did a little bit of a double tap here. Look, dude, for $100, this is pretty awesome. Give that a little play. Goof around a little with color. Nice. Now, this is not a lens you want to use for like shallow depth of fieldy kind of stuff, but a little 1-2. And even though this lens has incredible vignetting, we're going to add some anyway. So overall image quality, I would rate this lens fairly high. I wouldn't call it a 3 at all, but it would be a 2 point something, but I don't do decimals. And so I just round down and call it a solid 2. The overall images come together pretty well. This is a stupid picture. I would never keep this. I tried to get some of Marin, but she's a little too active today, and that 4.5 was kind of keeping me in a shutter speed that I didn't like. Pretty good detail on this lens, not blisteringly sharp. Again, we're at 200%. I was using animal eye tracking for this, but the shutter speed is just far too low for any of these to be any good. Yeah, we missed basically all of those. Lots of motion blur on that one. Hey, that's pretty good. Get a little radial gradient on her. Adorable. Got some more for running. That one missed. That's funny, but it missed. It's kind of shooting into the sun. Pretty low contrasty because of that. This is a cute picture. What is that? 2200 ISO. What was I doing? I had auto ISO on. That's why I jacked up my shutter speed, and so it jumped up to 2200. I like that. That's actually a pretty decent picture, I think. I want to say also, this lens is just made for kind of walk around, right? Taking pictures of your dog and taking pictures of like these flowers that are coming up, or you know, up close stuff of twigs and things like that, shallow depthy kind of stuff. That is not what this lens screams. This lens screams just walking around downtown, out on the town, a little cityscape lens, kind of walk around, candid shots, you know. This lens screams for that kind of thing. Super convenience because it's so tiny, very low profile, doesn't draw any attention. This lens is prime for that kind of thing. So I'm not using this in its best scenario. I will in the future, so go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss that. I'll do a little walk around town. Nice little contrasty kind of deal here. I actually kind of like this like the way it is. There we go. Just give it a little vignette to bring it in. Very nice. We are almost losing flowers. They're starting to die. This is actually quite beautiful. I like how the colors come together on this. It's slightly weak on this particular kind of color. That's probably coming from, I guess, the fact that the reds are have a bit of a orange kind of feel to them, but it is quite pretty. In fact, I don't want to do anything to this really. I kind of like it the way it is. That's a raw image. This is just like the wrong lens for this particular picture, but just analyzing what the lens does itself, looks pretty darn good. I do like this lens. I think this lens is pretty fun. just choose the right subjects for the, focus distance that this lens gives you, which is, not that close. That's why I think this lens just screams like walk around town and have a good time and just go out and shoot, and plink around. This is like the perfect kind of candid camera lens. It's dirt cheap. Nobody would notice that you're there. And then we did this little thing. I haven't shot like reflections in a long time. I generally like these kind of shots in black and white. It's pretty cool. I love the reflections being black and white. Let's give this a little radial gradient. Kind of bring focus into it a little bit. Not bad, Viltrox. This is a pretty nifty little lens. I'm actually not much of a kind of a street shooter or like a candid photographer, really. But this little tiny little chip lens, smaller than a pancake, that's why they call it a chip. It does kind of make me want to get out and see what this lens does and the kind of genre that I think it's absolutely perfect for. It kind of makes me want to get out and shoot a genre that I don't normally shoot. And for $100, I say that's an absolute win. In a nutshell, not bad optically, pretty middle of the road and slightly better than middle of the road in a lot of categories. Excellent job, Viltrox, and thank you for sending me the Viltrox 28mm f4.5 chip. If you're thinking about picking this lens up for yourself, check the links in the description. I'm affiliated with Adorama and B&H, so wherever you like to shop, I get a small commission if you do. I'm Z Wade, the Z Wade, and Z Wade Photo. Stay sharp, YouTube.